Welcome to another episode of Stories from the Edge of Life. My name is Parag Bharadwaj. I'm a palliative care physician in the US, and we have again a very special guest to inspire us, Dr. Tanvir Alam. Hello, Dr. Alam.
Hello, Dr. Parag. Good to be
Would you
back here again.
great, and would you mind just giving a quick introduction for our audience?
So I am a GP based in UK. By background, I used to be an orthopedic surgeon and a consultant. Uh, I wear many hats now, some of which are clinical, some are academic, and some are to do with equality and diversity. Um, in addition to being a GP, I'm also a clinical director of a PCN. I'm a training program director for advancing equity and differential attainment, a clinical consultant for uh, out of hours, and a lead GP for acute mental health services in Norfolk.
Outstanding. A lot of professional accomplishments, and we are going to talk about the powerhouse behind your accomplishments, and that is, you know, the inspiration that you derive from your father. And just so you know, for the sake of the audience, I have known Dr. Alam since my medical school days. I come from part of the world where we refer to our respected elders as uncle if it's a male, and auntie if it's a female. So I'm going to, for the sake of this conversation, refer to him as uncle as I used to refer to him, anytime I'm connected with him. So Tanvir, this is a conversation about you and your relationship with your father, and how he inspired you. So I of course got to meet with him uh, when we were in med school. But why don't you give us a glimpse of your relationship with him since your childhood days?
So I grew up sort of in awe of my father because he was a barrister by profession, and then he came to Middle East and he did business. So he was a very articulate, well-spoken, highly educated individual, and he sort of had the whole package. He had the looks to match with it. He had the charisma, the content of his speech, the way which he used to handle his affairs with great balance and poise, and his vocabulary. All of these things were inspirational things to me. I always wanted to be a bit like him, and I was always happy to just observe him because there was so much about him to observe and learn, and that has forged my growth as an individual and my growth as a professional as well.
So what got you into medicine? Because that's a different line of work. Like you said, you wanted to be like him, and then did he inspire you to become a doctor, or was it an interest of yours that he supported?
A couple of things here. Both my parents were sort of unfulfilled medics. My my mom got a place in medical school, but her father got her married off, saying this is no place for a woman to go into medicine. We're talking about the 70s. And my father wanted to join medicine, but he didn't have the necessary funds, the financial means to achieve that. So when I was little, I used to hear a few conversations about their unfulfilled ambitions and what a fantastic vocation medicine is. Um, so that was always there in the sort of the background. And then I naturally levitated towards the sciences as a child. So I ended up being quite good in science, especially biology and chemistry, and all the medical related TV shows that used to come. And this may sound as a cliche to you, uh, were very easily relatable to me. A particular show that comes to mind is Saint Elsewhere, um, a show from the 80s, which is a forgotten gem and nominated for about 65 Emmys during its run. And I used to get it. I used to understand what was going on in that show and say, "Oh, I think I can do this." So, so there were moments like that which all culminated along with the unfulfilled ambition of the parents who were who were in awe of medical profession and what value it brings to society. I would always hear positive stories from them as to the impact of a doctor. My father often told me, he said, "You can join my business, but you won't make an impact as much as you will when you are a doctor." And he was right about that.
Right. So very wise insights that were shared with you. Now, so you got into medical school, and I'm sure it must have been a proud moment for both of your parents. Um, and then life took a turn for you in terms of your father's health. So here you are, very young son who's just gone into med school, wants to go into, wants to become a doctor, help people, and then you're dealing with a situation in your personal life. Would you just give us a glimpse of what he went through and what you were going through?
Yeah, that was a very challenging point in my life. So we were in the first year of med school, and my father had left my mother to stay with me during the first 6 months of us joining uni. Um, and he went back home and he had an myocardial infarction, which he did not inform us until the first semester break. So I go back after 6 months on holiday, and that's when he informs us that he had this event, and he had lost about 17 kilograms. We couldn't recognize him when we saw him at the airport, um, and he didn't want to tell me before because I had just joined and he didn't want my education to be disrupted. Such was the level of sacrifice of the individual to ensure that his son stays the course. And I think that was a very difficult situation for me because I was in the first year of med school. I don't know anything about what an MI is and what its implications are. We are just studying anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry. And these very complex questions were posed to me by my mother and my extended family, thinking that I am already a doctor, but I'm just a medical student. So I think it was very difficult for me to deal with that. It was very difficult for me to deal out with the emotional fallout uh, from this because he held that information from me, obviously in my best interest. Uh, but I would have appreciated it if he had told me. I still would have continued medicine. I wouldn't have quit it. But uh, that was a difficult time for us collectively as a family. My mother took the big brunt of it, and she sort of lived the remainder of the time that she had with him, only dwelling on this sadly. So one event can have such a profound impact on the well-being of the family members. I can relate to that from a personal perspective.
And what about you? Did you have that constant fear or concern?
Yeah, I didn't know how severe a myocardial infarction was. Um, we in the Indian subcontinent we tend to say we call this as a heart attack, isn't it? It's the layman term for it. And the general consensus amongst people who are not medically trained is that this is sort of a one way ticket for you now. You have got less time on this planet, and you need to be very careful about how you live the rest of your life. Nobody knows what interventions are out there, whether it's this is a condition which is medically managed. Does it require surgical intervention? Conflicting advice and opinion from people in society. So very challenging thing to face, given the fact that you are an only son and you have there no other support network to fall back onto. Um, and you are supposed to be the one now who provides both emotional as well as medical advice and support at this time, while you yourself are coming to terms with the gravity of the situation. So it hits you at many levels. It hits you emotionally. It hits your confidence, your ability to function and thrive, and you sort of put a facade around yourself to get through it, because one has to get through it. There is no way. And I've always felt very alone when dealing with the complexities of my father's illness, because there is nobody for me um, to use as a sounding board in this situation. It's just me, and that is how it was for from that point on till the moment he passed away.
He did get to witness and participate in key milestones of your life. Uh, few come to my mind that I was part of.
Absolutely.
The So can you just describe us like the journey from med school onwards in terms of your personal accomplishments in line with what your father hoped and wanted for you, and uh, what was going on medically with him as well?
Well, firstly, I think we should go back to the first day of med school, which was a seminal moment in my career. So my parents took me to the anatomy museum, which is our first lecture. I had joined a few days late, and the words of my late father still resonate with me today. He says, so he told me, I have brought you here, you have to take me from here. I think those two sentences have encapsulated my drive and my commitment towards furthering myself both personally and professionally at all levels and at all times. That has never left me. Those two, there's never been a group of sentences which have meant more to an individual than those sentences have meant to me. So after finishing my undergraduate training and graduating from Manipal, uh, my father had the privilege of being part of that graduation. I did my master's in orthopedics in Madras, and he saw me achieve a master's in orthopedics. And then I uh, gave the PLAB exam on a whim to come to UK, because there were some issues with getting a suitable placement in the Middle East at the time. Um, and I managed to pass the PLAB exam, the first part. So I thought there was a career path for me in the UK. And at that point, there was the pressure on me to settle down and get married as well, as you tend to have in Asian communities. So I got married at the time, cleared my PLAB 2 exam, waited for several months to get a clinical attachment, which was very important to get work experience in UK. And that was facilitated by my father-in-law. And then the journey began in orthopedics. So I started off as a clinical fellow in orthopedics in multiple hospitals in the UK, um, leading a gypsy's life for some time. But then I found some aspects of orthopedics to be limiting. I wanted to broaden my horizons, look at different ways in which I could maximize my potential. So I took a sabbatical from orthopedics and went and did neurosurgery and A&E. And at that point, upskilled myself in urgent care and got an opportunity for GP training, wherein I moved to East Anglia. And I think really my career took off at that point, because it was a radical shift for me professionally. But I was keen to use the aspects of my surgical background to good use in general practice. And I had some issues at the end of my qualification struggle, which forged my role as an educator. The final part of the MRC GP examination is a real boulder, I must say, for international medical graduates, because we are not familiar with the British vernacular and the consultation structure. So it takes some time for us to get used to these models and to use them effectively. And that is why there is a high rate of attrition in these exams. As a consequence of my own experiences with the exam, I became a GP trainer, and I tried to facilitate the journey of those registrars. And now I am a training program director for exam support with a special focus on advancing equity and differential attainment. So life has come a full circle in terms of the collective experiences of the examination process. And along the way, I've added academic pursuits to my portfolio. I'm also an education lead for the Royal College of General Practitioners, the East Anglia faculty. I'm a GP educational lead now for out of hours. So I've designed educational modules for allied health professionals and GPs. I've also taken up leadership roles, wherein I am a clinical director of a primary care network, which has a group of six practices with a total combined list size in excess of 50,000 patients. And that has led me to new working relationships with the integrated care system. And I'm also a lead GP for acute mental health services, which came as a byproduct of me just looking to see what could happen in a secondary care setting. But that physical health model, which I have helped to develop, has become a flourishing part of the acute mental health services. We received a highly commended award from the RCGP for our work in the innovation category. And then we have had another poster presented for quality improvement for the same. And we now look to expand that information across the psychiatric networks in Essex and Norfolk area and nationally as well. The offshoot of all of these different streams of work, whether clinical, academic, leadership, has culminated with the fellowship of the Royal College of General Practitioners, for which I was nominated. And also, I am a fellow of the Faculty of Medical Leadership and Management and a fellow of the Royal Society of Public Health. Um, this was a journey which I never thought I would take. And I remember as a medical student looking at our professors in awe of all the initials, the post initials next to their name, and thinking one day it would be nice to have a few of those next to our name, and somebody speaks about us with respect and reverence. And I'm truly humbled and privileged that uh, that part of the dream and the journey has come true for me. And I'm still taking my late father forward as he instructed me to do all those eons ago, back in 1991. So that is a summation of my sort of my personal and professional journey, and the key link with my late father. And one must not forget the stellar efforts of my mother, who has stayed up with me every single night during an examination, or kept calling me, making sure I don't oversleep for my viva, or checking if I'm dressed. I have been fed and watered, uh, plying me with coffee and hot chocolate and sandwiches through the night. One cannot forget the stellar contribution. As is often said, a son, or a daughter cannot repay the mother for even one contraction of the womb. And I think that has never been more true than for all our glorious mothers. So there is a big role of the mother as well, not just the father. And the father tends to get all the good bits, all the credit, but the mom does all the hard work in actually grooming that individual. So I have to say, I have to mention both of them with equal respect and reverence here.
Oh, that's congratulations. You covered a lot in terms of your personal accomplishments, and you clearly have done your parents proud. Now, while you were working on your professional trajectory, what was going on the personal aspect with the with uncle's health, and what are some of the
Yeah,
situations that you got sucked into in terms of, you know, participating as a family member while you're focusing on your career as well?
yeah. So um, initially we had no knowledge about his condition. Then he had an angioplasty done, um, angiography initially at Dr. Cherian's hospital in Madras, who's a famous cardiothoracic surgeon at the time, who told him it's a medically stable condition and he can carry on with medication. But because of the socio-cultural impact of having a heart attack, as they say, you are always covered in cotton wool. So my father lived a life where he was never allowed to express any emotion or to laugh too much or to cry too much. People constantly gave him reminders of the fact that his mortality is a given at any point. And sadly, my mother also lived that life, so it was difficult to manage that, because you see your parents diminishing in their physical and mental faculties, and I think that is the most distressing part uh, of a child's journey, whether that child is young in age or older. Maturity levels are quite variable, so that can be a great challenge. Of course, he remained stable for a long time. He had another angioplasty in 2003, and that went well because he had some symptoms. That was done by Dr. Sanjay Mehrotra at Narayana Rudalya Hospital, Bangalore, who is a cardiologist who is the sum of 1,000 cardiologists. I can never thank that gentleman for what he did for our family. And it was in 2014 that he had acute heart failure. The acute heart failure as a consequence of a viral infection, coupled with the fact that he was a diabetic who um, never really gave much thought to his diet, and had a penchant for sugar till the very end, uh, led to a deterioration of his health. So he endured a mini stroke, which left him with a lateral rectus palsy on one eye, and that was a setback. And he developed double vision, from which he recovered. And then he had this heart failure, and this heart failure triggered a cascade of poor health, unfortunately. After that, he developed a biliary colic, and was unable to eat certain foods, and was in constant pain. So the last sort of 5 years of his life until his death in 2016 were covered with health related issues and the fear of what's going to happen next, which is already there right from 1991, but sort of got accelerated in the last 5 years with the um you know with the self perception that the condition is far worse than what it is, and the psychosocial impact of what people are talking around you. So when people around you talk negatively, that tends to have a profound impact on your own confidence levels and your ability to self manage your condition. And I think a lot of patients don't get that support. uh, I had to be a source of support and strength during that time, and I did the best that I could. But it was always an uphill battle, because the other forces of society never allow you to breathe. They never allow you to any sort of resting space. That there is always some negativity which is uh, confounding the conversation. So the heart failure, he was in the ICU for a week. He made a recovery from that, and that was amazing. We thought we had lost him in 2014, and then he recovered from that. Um, he then proceeded to manage this biliary colic in a conservative manner. His diabetes took a turn for the worse. He developed chronic kidney disease. It was not suitable for the initial line of medications, but declined to go on to insulin. But we managed with other drugs. And he was relatively stable. He came here to stay with me, witnessed the birth of my second son, which was in 2015. That was a happy time in our life, and spent a few months here, about 3 months with me, and said, "I'm going on holiday, son. I'll see you uh, in a month or so." And that was the last holiday. He went to his native place, Udupi, and after a few days, collapsed. He had been under the weather for a week, but didn't think too much of it. And then that was it. He was in the ICU. He had a cardiac arrest, and they took a long time to revive him. And the deoxygenation from that put him on a ventilator. And then he developed a multi-system failure and passed away 8 days later. And that was the 4th of February 2016. Um, the poignancy of that date is, time has stood still for for some of us. Some of us have moved on, uh, but the shadow of the great man and his contributions and um, his desire to forge a path of excellence, which I aspire to even today, remains. But his personal story, in terms of his health and his deterioration and decline, which was more mental in nature rather than truly physical. There was a physical aspect interspersed with that, but the inability to reconcile oneself to the fact that these things can happen and to be positive and proactive was a setback for him and for our family as a collective. And when you have a nuclear family like ours, with just one child, that is me, uh, the individual who has to face the brunt of it is that individual. Especially if they have a medical background, then one is expected to have the answer and the solution to all ills. And sadly, it's not possible for any one individual to have that skill. I think that is a supernatural thing. But the expectation of a loved one who is not well is always very high. And I think that is one of the greatest challenges of being the loved one and being a doctor with a wide variety of experience. People naturally expect you to step up to the plate and answer all questions and be a panacea of sorts in every single aspect of their care, which is not truly possible.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us. You know, I know you, but I personally never asked you these kind of questions, and because I respected your privacy, and I know these are not easy memories to relive. So I just wanted to thank you for sharing a glimpse of what you went through. Now we do have to wind up soon. The I have two questions for you. Number one, just describe the pressure you felt being a son and a physician, because you had dual roles. And the second is, I remember you mentioning when you came back to work and the first patient you saw was in a similar situation, I believe. If you could just share a glimpse of, um, those two scenarios, that'll be very much appreciated.
Yeah, I think it's a pressure cooker situation to be in when you are a doctor and a son, because you're expected to have the answers because you have trained and you should know better. But even no matter how objective you are in the situation, there will be a transference of emotions, because at the end of the day you are human. So your loved ones, when they ask you the same questions for the 50th time, it tends to be emotionally draining. Not It's not an irritation, it's just an emotional drain, because you have try to answer those questions. You try to be as supportive as you can, and at the same time, you need other health professionals also to step in and do those bits for them. Uh, but the overlap of those two roles can be difficult to manage. Uh, I have done it so far, but I would say it's not been an easy journey. Refers to your second question, the one of the first patients that I had to consult with after the return from India after my father's passing was a young mother who had lost her 18-year-old son to sudden cardiac arrest of no known cause. The autopsy revealed nothing wrong with that boy. He was just warming up in the gym to play indoor football, and then just collapsed to the ground and passed away. And the question that was posed to me was the support for this lady at a time when I myself was in bereavement, and there was nobody who asked me, barring a few friendly voices, how I am doing, because I am the doctor, aren't I? So I am already doing all right. That is the perception of people, that doctors are fine. They'll be okay because they deal with death and disease every day. Um, and this conversation, this consultation, the first patient to come to me after my return from from burying my father, was, I would say, the most single challenging consultation I ever done, because I felt I was tested on all levels, on levels of my resilience, my professionalism, my compassion. I do not think there could have been a more challenging consultation for me. I've done many things. I've done neurosurgery, orthopedics, urgent care, thoracotomies, but this was by far uh, the thing which hit me the most. But I got through that, and I supported that mother through that process while still trying to process my own grief. And I remember the words that I heard from her. She said, "Bereavement is a nightmare that you never wake up from. It comes to you in multiple spells." And she went through a very tough time dealing with the loss of an 18-year-old fit son. And I also remember another gentleman who lost his son when he was very young. And he said, "You can always bury your parents, but it's impossible to bury your children." So, so these are some of the experiences which make you realize how fragile life is. At the same time, how complex and challenging it can be for others. So it gives you a chance to reconcile yourself and say, uh, "Thanks for everything that is there, and I'm still here. I'm still striving," and that is the message of life. I have nothing more to share from that. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, one of the things that struck me in one of our conversations is when you said, there are certain voids in life that just can't be filled, but then you have to find things to fill those voids with. And this is in reference to your father. So, what are some of the things that you're trying to fill that void with? Because
Yeah,
I think your life so far, at least professionally, has been a great appreciation for all that your father has done for you. So yeah, if you could just share that aspect, that'll be great.
some voids cannot be filled, some shoes cannot be filled. Um, but I walk in the shadow of these legends. My forefathers, not only my father, my illustrious grandfather, and so on. They were all men of great caliber and integrity. So that gives me hope, and the presence of my immediate family, my mother and my wife and children, they fill that void on a daily basis. And seeing my children grow up and grow into good human beings who have a sense of culture, manners, and a feel for human suffering and how to react to them, uh, makes me realize that. I'm on the right track. And I think with these things and these joys have have helped me fill the void to a certain extent. And I remain positive and hopeful for the future. I now am able to talk about my father and reminisce about the great memories I had of him and the fantastic things that he has done. Where initially I was only consumed with the grief of him not being there. So, 6 years on from his passing, I can say that I can now talk about him with a smile and not always with a tear. And I think that's how I have managed to process it in small bits. And I think it was very evident at the time of my fellowship ceremony, his absence was felt. And that is always the case, isn't it? When you have holidays or events or special moments, you will miss those that are not there. But you remember them in your heart and you cherish their memory. And that is how you fill that void, by holding them in esteem and carrying their name forward in the best way that you can. And that is the effort and the struggle of life.
Well, I couldn't have put it in words as well as you did, and you've always had a way with words. The only thing that comes to my mind as a clinician is, I don't know, at least in the US, uh, the hospices provide bereavement support to patients and their families, and I'm not sure if that is something that is available to you in the UK, and if that's something that you would want to pursue. Just a friendly suggestion, right? But it seems like you're doing very well. Congratulations.
Thank
And
you.
I know it takes a lot of courage to share your personal journey, and we wish you many more accomplishments in your professional career, so that you can serve many more people in line with what your father or uncle wanted you to do. All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much for
Thank
this
you very
opportunity
much.
to share my experiences.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Take care. Bye.
Did you like this story? If so, please subscribe to this channel and like and share the video. Want more? Buy the book, Stories from the Edge of Life, available now on Amazon for more stories like this. All proceeds support Palliative Care Network, a nonprofit dedicated to alleviating suffering and improving the quality of life for patients facing end-of-life issues. Consider extending your contribution by donating through the link below. Thank you for your support.